Suddenly, my emotional state has changed.
Temas medioambientales.
There's a paradox.
Hello, everyone. I'm here today with Miss Anne Olivarius, who was a speaker at Congreso Futuro not too long ago. Hello, Anne. Thank you so much for joining us today. And it's great to see you again. And I hope you had a great time here in Chile when you were here. I'm pretty sure in summer and a great time, and it's such a long time. And now we're here under the COVID situation all over again. How have you been? How have you been this current times, and how have you been this year really?
Well, it's been wonderful. When I was in Chile, it was one of the greatest moments of my life. I'd come back in a heartbeat. It was fabulous, just fabulous. And the trip to Antarctica was just icing on an already very full and wonderful cake. I thank you for it immensely, indeed. And I've also made some good professional friends when I was there. And that has meant a lot to me and has opened up all ways of thinking and intellectual adventures that I had just not anticipated were part of the deal or what might even be possible to occur. So I'm really, really grateful.
And so I wanted to reapproach to talk about the idea or the issue of cyberbullying, especially taking into account, as you just mentioned, about the Zoom life that we're having currently and many other digital platforms that we're actually using on a daily basis, every single hour even. Regarding your experience dealing with this cyberbullying, why do you think was it so difficult to recognize this type of harassment at the beginning? Why was it so complicated to take into account? Because nowadays we can perhaps feel it more closer to us. But why is it such a, or why was it such a complicated matter to approach on a, like,
it's a really important question because it goes to the heart of why we did so little about it in the beginning. I think when things like cyber harassment started and revenge porn, for instance, which is what I spoke about when I was in Chile, I mean, certainly that problem has only deepened and it's become a massive problem. And why do we do nothing in the beginning? We don't have any legal tools to really address it. I've worked hard to put a revenge pornography law on the books that if you share intimate pictures of someone without their consent, then you can go to jail in this country, and thousands of people have gone to jail. But the law is not a civil remedy, it's a criminal remedy, and it only works if you deliberately decide you're going to hurt somebody, manipulate somebody, humiliate them, and you're found guilty of that, you go to jail. But if you did it with your friends just because you were having a good time and it was for fun, it's not a crime. And if you did it to earn money, you put it online and to get paid, that's not a crime. So there are big loopholes in the law. Also, it's not considered in Britain a sex crime. And most of the pictures that go online are, of course, of women, not just young girls, but now across all age brackets. I'm 65. There are tons of pictures every day put up of women my age. So it's not just a very small crowd. But what's happened in the beginning, of course, kids started doing this. And the view was from people, well, if she's, given her intimate pictures to some boy, then it's her own fault. She asked for it. It wasn't seen that because the boy then shared them inappropriately and wrongly, that it was his fault. It was a little bit like if a girl wears a skirt and she walks down the street and, it's at 7:00 at night, even though there are people around, but she happens to have the misfortune of being raped, people want to blame her, of course. Why did you dress that way, they ask. Why were you so provocative? As opposed to the person who perhaps raped her, why did he do that? That question isn't asked. So we had the same kind of mentality in the beginning days of revenge porn, of the cyberbullying. And because you can't trace addresses online, I mean, now we can, but you can do things anonymously. And when you control someone and you can humiliate someone anonymously, it doesn't bring out the best in us. it tends to have some people bring out the really worst in them. And in
Right.
COVID times, of course, things have gotten much, much worse because, in COVID times, you have not only the sense that women are home all the time and working at home, so they've got higher childcare responsibilities. And you see the domestic abuse levels during COVID throughout all countries, but it's raging. Those levels have increased. And so the revenge porn laws, the cyberbullying, they're much, much higher levels, perhaps because people are forced to be at home, to live online, to work through Zoom and Teams and on other ways like we're talking right now.
Correct. And in that sense, do you believe that, because you mentioned the cases that where people have committed suicide regarding these different issues because they cannot deal with the idea, because in the end it's a social matter, right? In the sense that it's not just you, but it affects everyone who can see your Facebook page, whatever social media you have. Do you think that basically the idea of cyberbullying became even stronger with the idea of younger generations being involved in this, in the sense that it's not only women, but especially younger women or children that are being like
Yes.
involved in this idea? Because now every year or every decade, every generation is even more younger in this whole digital world. Do you think that this is part of why perhaps we're taking more consciousness about this? What is your...
Well, I think it's that you're right. I mean, younger and younger kids, we know now that most 8-year-old boys in the United States and in Britain get their sex education through watching pornography. Now, that, regardless of one's views about pornography or about sex education, that cannot be a good thing. And that's available so widely. So boys learned how to have sex and how to have sex with girls, particularly through watching pornography. That generally doesn't produce a really fine response from the young girls because it's not about giving them pleasure or the experience as a woman. It's about boys saying, this is what I've got to do. This is what I do next. And you can see a lot of the sexual play is not a lot of wonderful stuff. Watching porn is not a great way to learn about your life, sexuality, how to exist in that adult world. So that's happening. And then you've got the cyber abuse that goes with it. And particularly, we saw with all sorts of incidences, Gamergate and other things where women get trolled, and it's like this hate fest that descends. And they go after you in all respects. And those gamers really went after one of the women there who was a gamer and who they turned on. And, she contemplated suicide. It can be really fierce. And Facebook, other online platforms do not take legal responsibility for what's on their platforms, generally with the exception of child porn. They say they can't handle other pornography, but they can certainly handle child pornography. They have the technology, so they have the technology to handle all pornography, of course. There are things that can be done, but nobody is regulating that market. There's too much money in porn. People don't want to regulate it. It's not being regulated. And it's still a male-controlled world. And they are essentially making the decision about this, and they don't want to regulate pornography.
In the more perhaps practical way, like what do you think should include this problem solving, aside of also having this like a more international organization regarding this, right? But what do you think should involve this whole idea of trying to get to the bottom, or trying to get the country or the state involved in this? Do you have an approach
Yes,
to this?
indeed. I think this is a cross-border, cross-politics view. It doesn't matter what your political views are or your religious views. Essentially, we all should be of one mind on this. There's no reason you have mothers, sisters, and you have brothers that may be porned and cyberbullied also. So we all have an interest in stopping this problem. This is not a positive problem for anybody. How I would go about solving it, though, is as in Britain, I was a force to get a revenge porn law put on the books. We had a very big case that I talked about in Chile where a YouTube star was filmed by her ex-boyfriend when they had broken up. He said, let's have one more night together. And so he got her drunk. And when she was paralytic drunk, he then undressed her and raped her, took a photo of this. And then after they broke up, 4 years later, she's a big thing on YouTube, and she has now a female partner, are being watched by a lot of young teenagers. And this couple, Chrissy and Bria, are doing all sorts of educational tools on how do you buy your first bra, how do you go on your first date, all these kind of, with music and songs and lovely, lovely things for our younger generation. And one day they got a call saying that Chrissy was nothing but a whore. She was a terrible person because this video had gone online. And so she came to us, and that prompted me to get to work to get laws to help her. We were able to get her videos down. We got a huge amount of money for her. It was the first time, and we were able to give her a new life. But the man who did it, didn't feel any remorse until it came to his pocketbook. Then he felt a lot of remorse. He didn't want to have to pay. A little bit was okay, but you're joking. This kind of money, he had to pay. So I think what we did in Britain is we put a law in the books. We're working now to put more civil laws. So it doesn't have to be a crime, which is higher level of evidence, higher level of proof. It could simply be a civil case that we have our power to bring to try to get justice in the court system. And with that, we'd have to be able to get the identification of IP addresses so that you know who you can sue. So there's no question of, well, wait a minute, who put that up? Because those who put it up, they all deny it, of course. So you have to be able to get that proof. If you can get things done on a domestic level, so you in Chile could get some laws done. In Britain, I'm doing it here. I'm working in the States as an American lawyer. When you can control this problem in the ways that you can, and then of course you compare notes of, okay, what did we do in Britain? What are you doing in Chile? What can we share on this? How do we regulate this in a positive regulation way? In the States, of course, the big challenge, and of course, the Trump administration filed suit this week against Facebook for being a monopoly enterprise. And, they're going to try because they bought WhatsApp and Instagram. They want to separate those. It's an anti-monopoly measure. They say Facebook is too strong. But one of the other issues with Facebook is that it's protected as a platform. The social media businesses are protected. They don't get treated as publishers. They can put anything on their website and say, hey, aside from child porn, not my fault, baby. I don't have to have any responsibility. So that law's got to change. That's way behind. Like a news magazine, like a publication, they all have to be responsible for content. Well, so too, you can't have these like crazy terrorists come on Facebook, which has caused a lot of problems. And even with these theories about COVID, which are wrong, drink bleach that President Trump has suggested, people have died from that. So we think it's really important, a lot of us, very activist lawyers, to rein in the social media platforms. They have to start taking responsibility for their content.
What is how do you think that there's a more positive view in this? Do you think, or have you, from your experience, do you think people are taking more consciousness about this? Do you think that in this sense we're improving, necessarily like in a general idea of somehow?
Yeah, well, you've got two forces against it. You've got people who are civil libertarians who say it's the people who don't want to wear masks in COVID. They say it's my civil rights. I can wear a mask or not. And of course, the issue, as we talked earlier, is not about whether they have a right to protect themselves or are obligated to protect themselves. That's their decision. But they are obligated to protect you and me and families and other people. By not wearing a mask, they're in defiance of that. So it's the same thing. It's that mentality that says, hey, put anything up on the internet. And some people, even in the United States, call it a First Amendment right, that, under the US Constitution, that should be just fine to put anything you want up. Well, a lot of people have that view, and it suits them to have that view, regardless of how dangerous, how much death is caused because of it, how much harm, sadness. The other big feature against this, of course, are the moneyed interests. The people who run the Mark Zuckerbergs, the people who run the major platforms in social media, a lot of Silicon Valley entities, they have no interest in that. They've got business interests in those social media networks. Why would I want to stop the money I'm making? And so who cares if a couple of thousand kids get killed every year or are mentally defective because they get hurt so much they can't operate as good citizens and family members? Who cares? Fundamentally, they don't look at it that way. They would resent even it being put that way. but the moneyed interests are against this, and they're stopping in the United States a change in the law that would make the social platforms have to take responsibility for content.
So this is really, really interesting, and it's so important. And I'm really admire your work. It's so interesting. And so, Anne, I really thank you for this conversation. It was
Thank
so
you.
much fun. Thank you for giving us all this idea of what's happening, how we can solve also these problems that we're having. So this is so interesting, and I hope that we can keep in touch and keep knowing and keep promoting this idea of having the consciousness of we have to fight this, and there are so many different possibilities to do so.
And we have to fight it not just for our girls. It is a gendered crime in the sense that most girls are affected, and women, but also so are our boys. And I want to really emphasize that it's not just a female issue. It's really a human issue. We're joined at this, and it's an international issue. You and I should be as joined and close to this as if you were in Britain or in the States. The fact that you're in Chile, we should be of one on this issue. And I hope the good people in the world will unite and try and do something about this. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Anne.
Suddenly, my emotional state has changed.
What I saw was there's a paradigm